Who of you knows about GitLab? Okay, who uses GitLab? Okay, who likes GitLab? Okay, that's a tough audience. No worries. So if you hop on Wikipedia and look for what GitLab is, this is what it says. It's a web-based Git repository manager with wiki and issue tracking features. And to be fair, this is like the mantra that was valid when GitLab started. 1.5 years ago or so, GitLab announced its Beyond CI/CD strategy, meaning that they not only focus on the development part, but also then on the ops part, giving you all the tools and all the power to plan, create, verify, package, and then release your application, configure your build pipelines, super important monitoring, right? Who monitors its applications? No one. Okay. Really tough audience. And then again, hop over to the dev part in planning new features or improving features and whatnot. So things not many of you have an idea what GitLab is or have used it. This is how you get started, right, to install it. So there are a couple of options. You could use the Omnibus installer. You could use Debian or RPM packages. Or like the cool guys do, use Docker. So this is basically what we are doing. We don't use the default or the official Docker images. We've built them on our own because reasons. Doesn't matter for now. And so if you spun up the Docker instance, you wait like 2 minutes or so, GitLab is up and running. You can click the Create Project button, and this is then kind of what you see. Just give it a name or enter project name, enter project description, and you're good to go. Since this obviously is a Magento conference, I thought it's pretty damn cool if I would bootstrap a Magento application, right? Obviously. Since we are the cool guys, we use Composer, create project, wait till like Composer downloaded half of the internet, and then we can add, commit, and push the files. And then they land in GitLab, and this is how it looks. Now up to this point, nothing happened regarding continuous integration, automated builds, or stuff, because GitLab doesn't know what to do with it, technically. What you do need to make the magic happen is a separate tool called the GitLab Runner. Again, published by the GitLab guys. You can install it as Debian package, RPM package, Docker container, whatnot. The main idea is that the GitLab instance is like the master instance that would then coordinate which jobs are run on which node. And these runner instances can be run anywhere and then execute like the build steps that you've defined in your configuration. To make things simple, we also use the Docker version, just spin up the and we're good to go. Now, up to this point, the situation is as follows. We got one container or one image running the GitLab instance, and we got another container running the runner. They are completely independent, so they could be on the same box, but they don't know about each other, right? So to connect those two instances, we have to configure a so-called runner instance, calling the GitLab runner register command. And we'll ask you a bunch of questions like what's the GitLab URL, what's the CI token, what's the description, should we use tags? I'll just cover that in a second. Should it run untagged builds? Should it be locked to one specific project in your GitLab instance? And then most importantly, you need to define the executor. This could be either shell, meaning all the commands would be then executed as GitLab runner user on the host. You could use Docker to spin up a new Docker container where all the code is running. You could use like Docker machine, Docker SSH, and a couple of other stuff. So you could really then pick the solution that makes the most sense for you. And then last but not least, you can define the default Docker image that should be used in case your project doesn't provide one. So basically, make sure you pick a sensitive default for all your projects. Cool, but still, we don't have the build up and running, right? We need to do something. And the something is, we need to add this file, the .gitlab-ci YAML file. Now, if you're familiar with Travis and the like, this is pretty similar in general, but completely different if you go into details. Let's see. So, first of all, we define a base image to use. So in this case, we use the PHP 7.1 CLI image. Then we define our test job, which would run in the test stage. You'll see later what that means. It's tagged with the tag Docker, which basically means that this will only run on a runner instance that also exposes this tag. So I can steer a bit like where the stuff is run. And then in the script section, we're going to list all the commands that are needed to configure the container, install anything that is needed, and so on and so forth. So in this case, since we're using the CLI image, I needed to install a couple of PHP extensions because Magento needs a bunch more that are shipped with a container. So that's basically what I'm doing here. Then obviously we need to install Composer because awesome. And we need to configure Composer because you definitely need access credentials if you want to pull the packages from repo.magento.com. So Magento user and Magento pass over here are two environment variables, or GitLab calls them secrets, that you can find in the GitLab UI. And these are exposed as environment variables during the build, and you can use them and rely on them. I know even though we don't have that much time, if you like this feature, you can thank me later because this is one of the very few PRs that I did against Composer. Jordi completely rewrote all that PR, but I can still take credit for inventing that stuff. Cool. And then let's run install, and here we go. So we, again, add, commit, and push the file. It ends up in GitLab, and you can see on the lower right hand of the screen, there is this blue icon. This is actually the indicator that a build is running. So we can click on that icon, and we can see our build pipeline. So we got a test stage. This is test with an uppercase T, running a test job. This is test with a lowercase t. If we click on that, we can see the output of that build. You can see like all the commands that are generated during this build. And hopefully at the end, if everything was working fine, GitLab will tell you, job succeeded. Obviously. So, but technically that's not really a build pipeline. That's just like one job that is run. If you consult the GitLab documentation, they say a build pipeline is a bunch of jobs that get executed in stages. So let's do that. Let's configure that. Because we still want to deploy that stuff on staging and production, obviously. So here's the thing. Again, we define the image. We define a couple of variables that are used throughout all our jobs, defining like the database, the root password, and stuff. Then we define our stages. Very basic. We have a test stage. We have a build stage. We have a deploy stage. The test stage, we've just seen what's happening, so I don't show you this in detail anymore. The build stage, I'll show you in a second, but basically it looks quite the same. What's a bit different is actually then the deploy stage. The difference up in the upper part is actually that we don't use the tag Docker, we use the tag docker-stage. And we do this for a reason. So let's assume like this is our data center. And all the runners that are tagged with the tag Docker are run over here. Now, I want to make sure that all those images or all those jobs run with a docker-stage tag are run over here, because that's the point where like all my domains for the staging are pointing to. If I would deploy the staging container over here, there would be no connection and it didn't work. So I can steer a bit with these tags, like where do these runners run their jobs. Right. Then we say we don't need a git checkout because we have our Docker container already prepared, so there is no need for a git clone. We do define our environment, give it a name, staging, give it an URL, and this is pretty badass because there's no need for you to have a wiki documentation like what's the staging URL, what's the production URL, what are the access credentials and stuff, because it's all in there, it's versioned, and this will make sure that throughout the GitLab UI, there are a couple of buttons that you can just press, so you don't need to remember this URL. So this is really, really cool. And then we say staging builds should only run for changes applied to the master branch. So if you push that file again, this blue icon occurs, the build is running, and it looks a bit more complex than we've seen before. So we got the test build and deploy stages, and the test build and the deploy staging jobs. So test is running, everything's cool, build is running, and this is what happens. Now, situation is as follows. We've installed like all dependencies that we need, the decomposer install and stuff. So everything is there. We're going to package everything together in a tar gzip file. We'll move the tar gzip file back in the project directory, and then use Docker and use the build arguments to pass this tar gzip file into the Docker build. So Docker will take this tar gzip file and then extract it during the build. And in the end, you got your container with all the different files that are needed for Magento to run. We tag it, and we push it to Nexus, which is our Docker registry. So build succeeded. Awesome. Next step, deployment phase. What do we do here? Well, first of all, we do pull the latest version of the image down. And you can see I'm using the CI commit refslug variable all over the place. This contains the exact same value as in the build stage before. So even if those jobs are run on different machines, those values are the same for like the whole build, so you can rely on them, and you can make sure that you're using the same image all over the place. We do stop MySQL, we do stop the application, we remove the MySQL and the my application container, and then we spin up the MySQL instance again. We spin up MySQL, we spin up Magento again, linking it to the MySQL container and exposing a couple of labels for Traefik, which is an HTTP reverse proxy that we are using, so that it can then route the right request to the right container. So if you wait a minute or so, this is then what happens. I'm not recommending for you to deploy the default site in production, but technically just for this example, it should be fine. Cool. So how do we get that stuff on production? Again, pretty similar to the staging stuff. We use a different tag again, docker-prod, so we exactly know where the stuff is deployed, you know story. And again, we say no git checkout, please. We define our production environment with a matching URL. Say this only works for master branches or changes to the master branch. And then most importantly, we say when manual. And what this has as an effect, we'll see in a second. So this is basically then how the build pipeline looks. And you can see in the deploy stage, we got 2 jobs in, deploy prod, deploy staging. So everything is fired up. It will work fine until the point where we deployed staging. And then the build pipeline is just going to stop. Nothing happens anymore. If you pay close attention, on the right-hand side of the deploy prod job, there is something that looks like a play button. Now here's the rule. If it looks like a play button, it probably is a play button. What can you do with a play button? Well, you can press it. Exactly. So if you press it, we'll fire up the production deployment, which is then prepared. Now we do that because of a reason. So we are an agency. We are working for clients or of any sort, and I'm not saying clients don't trust us, but they want to have a final say of what's going live, right? So we deploy on staging, so our project managers can check, our clients can check, and when everybody who's important signed everything off, we can then just press the play button, and the production deployment will work, and this will land on production. Awesome. Now this is pretty cool for companies with 1 developer or so, or less frequent changes, where you exactly know what's happening on staging. But if you have tons of developers and staging updates are hit regularly, you have no idea what's going on staging, right? If you want to test that, that's really hard to predict what's going on. So ideally, we would need an environment per developer. That would be really awesome. But why not go a step further and say we need an environment per feature branch? And this is basically what this review apps feature of GitLab does. So it can create dynamically environments, spin them up, tear them down for every feature branch that you commit to your GitLab project. And this is how it looks. So again, we got a different tag, docker-review, so that we know exactly where stuff is deployed, you know the story. No git checkout, and this is where the magic happens. So we can use variables when defining such an environment. We use the CI commit ref name, which is basically the name of the branch we're working on. And we use the CI environment slug, which is a URL-friendly representation of that branch name. And then we say, whenever this environment is stopped, call the stop review job. We also say, this job should apply for changes only for branches, but not for master, right? So master is reserved for staging and production deployments. Any other branch is then turned into a review app. And the stop review job looks pretty much similar. We say no git checkout when manual, because that's weird, because this job is never called manually, but since it's called by another job, you need to set this. So just don't ask. And then we just say, OK, stop the environment. And back in the script section, we would then kill the Docker containers that are part of this review app. And that's basically it. So let's test that. So assuming the client came to us and said, hey, I want to protect my whole site with a login, so no one can actually see the catalog or the product and stuff without logging in. Luckily, we've built an extension for that, so it's up in the marketplace. So if you want to check it out, use it. It's open source. So all we need to do is installing this extension, add, commit, and push the files. And then when you hit the GitLab instance, GitLab will scream to you, merge request, merge request, merge request. So you need to push that button, which will bring you up to this screen. So you can define a title, you can define a very good description, like none. No, just kidding. Just don't ever do that. And then the build just runs, like the test phase runs, the build stage runs, and then the deploy review job is running as well. And in the end, GitLab will even tell you where to deploy that stuff, right? It says deployed review feature force login on, and then review whatever less than a minute ago. And if you watch closely, this link actually is a link. So you can click on that. A new browser tab will open, and you can see your instance. And that looks like this. Pretty cool. So we got an instance exactly for this feature branch, completely in isolation. How awesome is that? Great, but now the magic question is, how do the changes get on staging in production? And actually, that's super simple, super easy. All you need to do is press this little green merge button. So what this does is, it will create a merge commit in the master branch, which will, guess it, kick off the build pipeline again. So test will run, build will run, deployment staging will run. Someone will manually sign it off and press the play button, and we are live in production. And that's basically like a 50-minute presentation done in like 15 minutes. How awesome is that? So thank you very much for listening. I know this was a bit fast-paced. I have to say I'll be here like the whole day, and I'll be here tomorrow. If you have any questions, I'll love to go into detail with that, because like there is so much more I can tell you about all that stuff. Thank you very much for listening. Are there any questions right now? Oh, yeah. So do you have time for questions?
We definitely do. We got about
Perfect.
3 minutes.
Awesome. I did this just for you guys. So over here.
Gentleman right now.
Not yet, no. So we just host that stuff ourselves and for our customers. So we haven't used that in the cloud instance. I'm sorry. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Could you speak a bit louder? I can't hear. Right now, not yet. So these are, I'm not saying like barebone plus Docker, but it's like kind of the thing. We are currently experimenting with Kubernetes and stuff, and especially with the GitLab connection and the GitLab features of monitoring stuff. So that's definitely one of the next steps for us. Yeah. Could you say that again, please? File permissions, okay. Right. Well, so far we haven't had any issues regarding file permissions, so maybe we should talk later and figure out like what's your problem. Okay, anyone else? No one? Okay, cool. So then, thanks again. As I said, I'll be here the whole day and tomorrow. If you have any questions, just find me. Thank you very much.